welcome to Ask the Manager. Here we are, it's November and no snow yet, so we'll just have to cross our fingers and see how far into the season we can get before we get our first snowfall. Speaking of that, there's been a lot of advertising for people to snowplow. Have we gotten enough staffing for that yet?
We don't have everyone that we'd like to have at this point. We still, in our ideal scenario, are about 8 pieces of equipment short. What we do in a scenario like that, we have to draw upon more staff than just the highway department. And some folks may think that that's, kind of a standard business practice, but we try to stay away from that. We don't like to have mainly water and sewer employees be a part of our frontline plowing, because under many laws, and probably mainly Murphy's Law, is that we'll have a water main break during a snow event, and then if we rely upon water and sewer staff to be on the front lines, then we have critical routes, a main route that is uncovered unexpectedly, which is a challenge during a storm. So we try to balance the routes the best that we can based on the equipment. We never have the same pieces of equipment each and every year, but this year has been a bigger challenge than recent years. So we're still looking for at least 8 pieces of equipment, and that varies from heavy duty pickup trucks to bigger pieces. So you can contact the Highway Division Manager, Nick Rapekta, off of our website, or anyone within the DPW, and we'll...
Anybody walking down the street that
Exactly.
says I'm a town employee,
Yeah.
we'll get you in.
Yeah.
So how are the rates? Did you have to adjust your rates? Is it competitive from town to town now?
We think we're competitive, yeah. There's some rates, some towns are higher in some areas. Some towns have different needs. The city of Worcester's topography is a lot different than
Yeah.
ours, so they have some higher rates than we do. But it's apples to apples as close as you compare it. We have been doing our best to keep up because of the scarcity in the market. This year is a little more challenging than it has been in the past, but it hasn't been easy in recent years.
Where have all the drivers gone? Because people liked working for the town. It's not that people, had complaints about plowing for the town. They always got paid, and it was predictable, and they knew they were going to get paid on time, which doesn't always happen in that business. So where have they gone?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. A lot of whole companies are just no longer interested in plowing in general. There are some private entities that pay companies monthly regardless if it snows or not. We certainly still don't do that. We can't really compete with that. So you may be able to go park your backhoe over at White City, and as long as it's sitting there, you're going to make $30,000 or whatever it is for the winter, whether
Right.
it's turned on or not. So that's a challenge. And then we have seen more and more experience across all lines of our business, whether it's DPW operations or police and fire, that individuals are looking for more time at home and less overtime. And certainly, some of these snowstorms, you can be on duty for 30 plus hours. So,
And then if you have the blizzard of 78, you could
Yep.
be on for the month.
Yeah, that's true. So there is a general trend in the market that folks just, there was a point in time where you couldn't offer enough overtime, regardless of what line of business it is, whether it's your employee or a contractor. It's just not the case anymore. People are looking for a little more balance and predictability.
So overall, with town positions, not just fire and police, but other town positions, how is your staffing for that?
Oh, we're good. We've been able to hire a lot of people, backfilling positions, filling a couple new slots that we had opened up. As of July 1st, it's been a lot of effort to get to this point, though. We've made it a little harder ourselves on doing some internal promotions, which creates the openings behind whoever you're filling, but we're getting to a bit of a slower time in the hiring department than we have been over the fall months. So really proud of the talent that we're getting on board. A lot of key positions have been filled throughout DPW and other aspects of the organization. So we're seeing good candidates and making good hires, and hopefully it slows down for us a little bit. We bring some more stability back into the organization.
And you mentioned fire and police as key departments that have shortages.
Yeah.
Is there any improvement in that area at this time?
Well, fire has been rather stable. We hired the 4 additional firefighters 2 years ago at this point in time with the assistance of a SAFER grant. So by the end of next calendar year, they'll be fully on the town's budget as far as financial responsibility. So the fire department has been stable. There is still interest in being able to have a 3-person operation out of Station 3, which we still don't have. So we're considering that, but it's really dependent upon a SAFER grant if we're going to do that in the near term. Police has been a different matter. We've had trouble because a lot of folks aren't as interested in that career field with the kind of the press, for lack of a better way to put it, about policing. There's been a lot of changes at the state level with POST, which is police officers standards, peace officer standards. Yeah, liability that comes associated with that, and what happens if they're found to be, or can be found personally liable in some instances, depending on what occurred. So that's definitely reduced our candidate pool. And then we've been challenged to just be able to backfill the retirements, because it's happened on the other end of the spectrum. Not only are less people interested, but those folks that, maybe 55 and are eligible to retire, who would have worked 3-5 more years because they love what they do, just said, well, I've had a successful career and I don't want it to be tarnished by, some new rule in the end, or be part of any cloudy circumstances, even if things, if I continue to do the job professionally as I have done my whole career. So it's been a challenge in the police field. We aren't sacrificing our standards, I can promise you that, as far as who we're bringing onto the police force, and what our expectations are for them. But we continue to have officers in every academy, and a new one will start at the beginning of the calendar year, and then there'll be another one next spring, and we're doing our best to get as many seats locked away for those as possible.
Well, I am one of the fans where I believe all of our town departments have really good employees, and we do function at a high standard, and we have high expectations. And so we want to keep it that way.
Yes.
So, and I think you've been doing your best to make that happen too, so thank you. Now, OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Just when we think it's supposed to be boring with that, now it's a topic again. So what's the hot issue now?
Well, we had a good conversation with the Finance Committee last week about it. We're moving into this new era with pension and other post-employment benefits. Those two things go hand in hand. We were fortunate to have achieved 100% funding of our accrued liability on the pension system. So now we'll begin to work both between funding for the pension system and for other post-employment benefits, where on paper we do have a large unfunded liability, about $54 million. It's not exactly the same challenge that we had on the defined pension or the pension benefit side of things, but it's a conversation that will be important and will change year to year. So we make sure we continue to keep our pension system fully funded, but also do our best to reduce some of that accrued liability for other post-employment benefits, which for us really consists of two things. It's health insurance benefits that the town promises to pay a portion of retirees' benefits for their entire retirement for the duration of their life. And then to much lesser extent, life insurance benefits for retirees. They're only eligible for basic life insurance. The life insurance portion of it's about $20,000 a year currently, and the health insurance is about $1.4 million annually. So we have no problem funding that annually, but the Government Accounting Standards Board says that we should really be documenting how much we're making and promises. Basically for me, who's not retirement age, the town's promising that if I do retire from here, that they'll pay a portion of my health insurance. So the accountants of the world say you should be taking that liability now while I'm an employee, not waiting till I retire. So.
Well, I worry about retirement for town employees because I don't believe that people making the decisions for that have a loyalty to town employees. Mm-hmm. And I wish that we could find a way to make sure that loyalty builds, because they did work for the town for all those years, and they had jobs that possibly paid less than if they had gone into the business world. Mm-hmm. And so you just don't want to see that change in a way that hurts the retiree.
Sure.
That's my opinion. Now you're working on FY23 budget, and the budget hearings don't happen until March. But even though at this point you're focused on the schedule and what's happening for FY23.
Right.
So where are we? What are you looking at?
We're looking at revenues right now.
Doom and gloom, or
no,
are we?
Not doom and gloom. A lot of benefit from, all benefit comes from the override and the support that the voters gave us with the passage of the override. It's really a different set of circumstances this year, and it's a lot clearer at this point. It doesn't necessarily make it easier. We don't have limitless resources, but there's a lot more clarity early in the budget process. We're looking at revenues, and I'm really trying to understand where we thought we were going to be in the spring whenever we were doing our projections related to the override, and where we are now. So those 9 months, 7, 8, 9 months are really important. Not a lot has changed, but the changes that have occurred that we can see and understand are all positive. We've had a really sharp rebound in our local receipts. That's our fourth largest revenue category. If you exclude utility revenue, that just stays with utilities, it's our third largest revenue source. And that number really rebounded during fiscal year 21. And it continues to be really strong in some of those discretionary spending areas like meals tax, cannabis excise tax. Those numbers are much stronger than we anticipated last year at this time when we were developing the budget. And that's good news.
We're getting true benefit from having the cannabis dispensaries in town. We're starting to now feel the benefit of that?
We are. Fiscal year 23 will definitely feel that benefit. I think it's also interesting from a timing standpoint that fiscal year 22, because of the pandemic, will be our first real look at the benefit of all the new restaurants at Lakeway Commons and other areas of the community. And now our numbers were lower from a budgetary standpoint, what we estimated in the past for meals excise, but we've collected like 45% of what I thought we were going to collect for the full year in the first quarter. So, if things continue to be really strong through the holidays and then in the spring, we're really going to experience the benefits of having all those new restaurants open and kind of closer to normal. I think maybe back to normal economic activity as far as how people are going out and about and doing their things again.
It still amazes me how many people eat out. I don't want to say regularly because I eat out too, but all the time. Mm-hmm. Like they don't even think to cook a meal, which actually benefits the town.
It does.
And Jersey Mike's has opened down on Route 9, so they're now a major contributor to our tax base, and there's plenty of cars there, so I go by and I applaud because I'm just happy to see that, those storefronts are being filled, and they're filled with businesses that are going to bring more revenue to the town.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty exciting. Now, what about pay as you throw?
Pay as you throw, it's pretty steady state where we've experienced, I think, what was expected in fiscal year 21, more people being at home, more trash at the curb. But the financial model that we have is still sound. You know, we adjusted rates last year. We're seeing the benefit of that, and that the general tax levy is contributing less of the revenue to the overall expenses, which is good. You know, it still stays right around that 50-50 level. We had gotten to a place where the tax levy was contributing more than 50%, and that's why we adjust the rates. We also have the unique benefit that the recycling market has rebounded, and we're actually not paying to get rid of our recyclables like we were maybe 18 or 20 months ago, where in some instances we're actually receiving revenue or credits from those recyclable materials when they go to our partner at Casella.
So hopefully I'm not jinxing you, but you are starting to sound like where we left off before the pandemic really hit.
Yep.
That things are rolling along, the town's in good shape, and looking forward to the benefits of all these business plans that have been happening behind the scenes over the last couple of years. Do you see or hear of more of the storefronts being filled in the near future that are empty?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything about the bigger retail spaces, say, you know, Bob's or anything like that. But
Bob's moved to Westboro.
I did see they opened a store.
They moved.
Yeah.
They deserted us and moved to Westboro.
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't heard any of the big spots like that, but a lot of interest in town for new developments, and hopefully some of those smaller spaces get opened up within the next 6 months because of people's spending habits and the market, you know, returning to normal.
And if you look at, there's Bed Bath & Beyond, Pier 1 Imports, and Bob's in that one shopping area. It would be really exciting if they put in a couple more restaurants. I keep saying that because so many people go out to eat. Then let's eat in Shrewsbury. Let's not have to drive distances to get to those good restaurants. And there's 3 good spaces there for reasonable sized restaurants. I don't know if we'll ever get good clothing stores, but we could at least go for the restaurants. Now, we've had disturbing news with our COVID numbers. We're at 64 this week.
Yeah, 64,
last week.
Yeah, 64 on last week's report. We see these upticks. They hit you really in the face, and I want to believe when the numbers are going down, and then you stay so conservative, and then you're like, oh, wow, they really were going down, especially when something like this happens. Yeah, it's almost double the weekly count, you know, in comparing the last 2 weeks, last week to the prior week. And unfortunately, it fits the pattern of what you're starting to hear in the news again, of an increase in numbers across the country. I believe I heard Dr. Fauci say that over the last week, it's been an average of 90,000 cases in the country per day. So just high numbers again. Also, again, following a surge in Europe, you know, so just the pattern, unfortunately, continues.
So last week, the number was 197 cases in Shrewsbury in 1 month. And I keep thinking, how are they catching it? Where are they going? Are they vaccinated? Aren't they vaccinated? How does that impact schools? You know, what age group is it? It seems to be, I don't know, so like say 20 to 50 has a large number of the cases, or the most cases. So I wonder what they're doing that we have so many numbers. Are you getting any feedback from the Board of Health?
No, we may start to finally receive some of that data as UMass is standing up a more robust research arm, and they've reached out to cities and towns in the region to offer their support. So I hope to be able to answer some of those questions in the future. I wish it would all have got behind us and we didn't have the opportunity, but we do continue to see vaccination levels increase. We have begun hosting booster clinics for town employees, things like that, so that, early round, police, fire, public health staff. So vaccination levels still remain really strong and are growing, but the case numbers, are coming in still.
And it is pretty easy to get that booster in town now, where we were scrambling and everybody was trying to get those first vaccinations, but the boosters seem to be going along smoothly with flu shots and that, just going into the local pharmacies. They seem to be pretty accommodating. So we were at 81% of the residents in town had their first dose, but 72% are fully vaccinated. I still would like to see that number higher, and that may be, may or may not impact the relevance of who's getting it. And it's just important to know that the people who are vaccinated, if they get COVID, aren't as sick and severely ill as they were or could have been before the vaccinations.
Right, and these cases continue to be just somewhat unknown. We don't know the severity of the illness. Some of these could be because someone needed a test to travel, needed a test to go to a meeting, needed a test to go to a conference, or was exposed to someone, but they themselves were asymptomatic, and then the next person in the household. So there's a number of factors to not feel so down about it. We aren't experiencing very sick folks that we're being made aware of at this point. But I think everyone's still safest to get their vaccine and consider the booster when it's time for that.
Now, parks and cemetery. The parks department, they always need more fields. And there is a lot of activity. How, going forward, will the parks department handle some of the programs that they previously had that we weren't able to have? Are they going to be easing into that, or are they going to hold off and wait for another season? What's the plan?
We plan to continue to move back to where we were, but it's our goal, I won't steal any one importance phrase, but build back better. Like we really want to improve our parks and recreational opportunities. We saw when residents had to kind of turn inward to the community, that they were in the parks, they were walking, they were more active, and Dean Park became overcrowded. So it's not all just about Dean Park. What other parks can we bolster? And then our recreation programs and opportunities is something that we look to invest American Rescue Plan Act dollars in to really provide more opportunities for residents. It will be kind of unfortunately we're in winter, so everyone's a little bit more skeptical to be inside versus outside, but I really don't see any restrictions, knock on wood, for next summer, kind of just being back fully to normal in the spring and in the summer as far as our activities, and hopefully more than we had in the past.
I hope it's not a false sense of security, but it feels so much safer when you can be outside.
It does.
To be around people, to be outside. When you talk about the American Rescue Plan, you're planning to figure, or you're setting plans in motion for how you're going to use that money. How are you going to use it?
So we're making a proposal to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night at their meeting, which will be November 23rd. We have received $5.7 million, and I'm making a proposal that we spend about 4.7 of those, largely in the public health realm, in our direct response. That includes some town operations, improve communications, be able to build better data sets, interact with more residents, because we found a lot of weaknesses. We couldn't collaborate with members of the community that we don't have good contact with or regular communications with, so we want to build that a little stronger. We need to make some investments in public health generally, mental health specifically. We're going to make, water and sewer investments. So I think it's a good approach. Again, this is what I'm calling a phase 1 recommendation. Phase 2 could come as soon as 3 or 4 weeks later. We continue to be updated, and staff engages in seminars to make sure that we're spending the dollars where we're allowed to spend them, because again, while there's a lot of open-endedness to the guidance, that's not the highest level of comfort for local governments. Before I spend $11 million, I want to make sure that someone's not going to knock on the door in 2 years and say, why'd you do that? So
Right.
we just want to be smart about it, and in some ways conservative, but the underpinning of this whole thing is to allow the town to recover, allow the Commonwealth to recover, and allow the country to recover. So we can't wait forever.
And do you believe that other towns are being as conservative and legit with their use of this funding? I mean, you have a reporting system for that, correct?
We do, yeah. We have to report there's a regular reporting cycle that's defined in the statute, in the federal statute and the interim rule. So yeah, I'm comfortable. I haven't seen too many things that I scratch my head at. I have a little bit of envy for those towns that have really put pen to paper and said, nope, this is what we're doing, this is our interpretation. So for me at this point, it's been nothing but reassuring in how we're thinking of our plans. We do want to make investment in parks. We are going to make investments in buildings to improve air quality inside. So just seeing other towns do that. Other maybe more resources communities, whether they're in Massachusetts or in another part of the country, who maybe it's a city of 2 or 3 million people that I could reasonably assume they have 20 or 30 people working on this versus the 4 or 5 that we have. It just gives a higher level of confidence when you see other folks' plans. So
you brought up air quality in buildings. A lot of people may not agree with what I'm saying, but as an former infection control nurse, air quality is so important in how that air is moved and how frequently. So anything you can do to improve air quality, it's something that you don't see the reward, it's just there.
Yep.
And so it's hard for people to sometimes grasp that.
Yeah, I think so a little over $400,000 will be invested in buildings and air quality in several schools and the town hall. And the town hall, is so critical because it's our emergency operations center. It's where the communications would be managed for any crisis. It's where all of our IT infrastructure is. So we have needs for people to be in there regardless of the outside circumstances, and we are going to make some investments in that, and I think we're justified in doing so.
Do you think that town hall will ever be renovated after the police station? I mean, is that in your mind that still really needs to happen?
It's a huge need. You've probably seen walking through town hall recently, Donna, we've cannibalized some conference room space like the old selectmen's room and turning it into offices. That makes it harder to find meeting space, obviously, because we're reducing meeting space. But we need space for staff, and we're really out of pulling rabbits out of our hat. And as the town grows and we need to provide more and better services, we have incremental staffing needs, and we're just trying to catch up with that. So I hope so, I guess is my short answer.
I hope so. Now, we had 2 police officers rescue a 1-year-old girl, female, who had stopped breathing, and they were successful at saving her life and should be recognized for that. And then I thought about it. Police do things like that, and fire, all the time. We just don't hear about it, and this time we did, and hats off to
Police and fire.
I know I'm going to kill their names if I say it. Sean Villier. I wasn't too bad. And Matt Cayola. See, that wasn't too bad. So hats off to them. And I applaud them, and grateful that we have people with the skills to do that in town. But I know that they perform rescues as part of their day.
Yeah.
It's just part of their day. But another thing that we have people with those skills and that they're motivated to have the skills to do that. And it sounds like I keep wanting to praise them. That's different than the way things may have been in years way back, but in years past, where these employees rise to the occasion. And
Yeah.
and they have had proper training for it too.
Yep. Yeah. Two police officers, 2 firefighters were, the first 4 on the scene there, and they did a wonderful, amazing job.
Yeah. Now the selectmen set the tax rate and raised it. Now I only have one question, and I'm sure there's an answer to this. They raised the taxes. At the same time, the valuation has skyrocketed in town. Was there really a need to raise the taxes if the valuation's gone up?
Yeah. So the math formula that works out on that is that we know how much money we've appropriated and we're allowed to raise through what happened at town meeting. And then the 2 other factors, the tax rate and the value of the property, fit to get to that final number. So despite the rapid growth in property values, the tax rate still needed to go up a little bit. I will be honest with everyone. I think if the culmination of the cost of the police station and the override weren't involved, you'd have likely seen that tax rate decrease so much just because of how quickly property values rose over 2020. So the values that are coming forward in this year are the actual sales from calendar year 2020. So you can imagine through 11 3/4 months or 2/3 months for 2021, those values have only continued to increase. So perhaps next year, since things will be more level set year over year, we will see downward pressure again on the tax rate itself. But the end dollar amount and the tax bill amount is what folks will always see the most impact on and notice the most change on. So
Another reason to get that revenue from other places, and another reason to embrace having those businesses come into town. Now, there was something about another business going on Harrington Ave, but what disappointed me, I don't know why. It's in the business zone, so it has a right to be there. But why people want to put houses in there also? Why don't they just use it for business and let us get that revenue? But no, they're going to put in more houses, and we know with houses comes more expenses to the town ultimately.
Well, I think that the answer on that is pretty clear from just that prior conversation. It's because there's so much demand in housing, right? So actually a couple parts of our conversation today, we see vacancies in the commercial world. So while the economy is strong, there's still less certainty in retail and those types of sectors than there is in housing, especially in Massachusetts. And so in talking with developers, in some ways, in my words, those housing units are the warm blanket and the guaranteed income. We've spoken with the operators of Quinn 35 at Lakeway Commons, and since every apartment has been available to rent, they've never been less than 98% occupied.
Can you believe that?
So that's 1 or 2 apartments vacant at any given time for more than a month, So that's why people are building more housing, because those are the returns that they see on the housing side of things, where in all likelihood, if they're going to open up a 2,000 square foot office space or retail that they've got to go out and find a tenant for, it could sit vacant for 3 or 4 months.
It's risky.
Yeah, it's much more risky than the housing.
And we know everybody wants to come to Paradise to live.
That's right.
So, speaking of that, there was a report from the group about the center, the use at the center and the activity at the center. And they want more activity on the common, which is interesting because they do acknowledge the traffic and they do acknowledge, you know, how to have cars parked there and still utilize the town common. We were always nudging people to Dean Park away from that area to keep the people safe and off the common so that they didn't get hit by the cars zooming by. So how to get traffic and pedestrians to be able to be in the same place and be safe. I think the scarecrow activity on the common is awesome. I always enjoy that, and I think a lot of people look forward to that. And now we have the Yuletide Festival or Yuletide Market and lights on the common. That's exciting, and it's so nice that that activity will be taking place on December 4th, actually. But what do you think of what other kinds of activities could be there where you don't have kids running out into the street or people stepping off the curb into traffic? How do you coordinate that?
I mean, I think when we have events like that, it'll be really important to, you know, have just those police in the area. As a lot of folks know, I live in Sturbridge, and I do enjoy going to some events that they have on their common, which is on 131, which is a major road, much like 140, maybe a little bit less traffic, but just always a great police presence, cruisers parked way back from the crosswalk, so if folks are arbitrarily slow themselves down and they go back and forth there between the public house and the Sturbridge Common, which is across the street. So I think, you know, in a similar setting here where we have the library and the common, you know, we'll just take, you know, the four prongs of that intersection and, you know, slow people down and allow people to enjoy the town center as safe as we can. We probably won't have as many people, nor do we want, as Salem has, but, you know, I think that's something that you see there at those major intersections. Some roads are just shut down.
I'm just thinking of the tractor trailers coming through 140, and everybody's in a hurry, just making sure that you can assure that people are safe while they are celebrating there. One thing that was bothersome to me was that there was something in one of the papers about homeless students and a grant to support homeless students, and I'm thinking, we have homeless students. Like, you don't think about that. We have kids going to school that are homeless. Right now, I think, if I read it correctly, there are 0 at the present. All I kept thinking was, if we know there's homeless students in town, we need to find better ways of embracing them and helping them get through whatever crisis they're in, not just waiting for grants. We need to find ways that, because I can't imagine that this community wouldn't want to make every effort to help those people.
Yeah, you know, we do experience from time to time people with school-age children becoming long-term tenants at some of the hotels and motels within the community. So those individuals would fall into that list, and we do the best that we can support them. They're eligible to go to Shrewsbury Public Schools once they're identified. And, you know, that's when we take advantage of those additional funds and things like that. There's a really good mechanism in place once we're aware of someone and funding that cost of their education and making sure that they're there regularly. You know, so I know that Days in the past is on the, you know, a bus route, and we pick anyone up that's there. So become a standard bus stop if there are children there and they happen to be there for weeks or whatever while they're in transition. So they would fall into that category. It's a little bit less of the concept of homelessness like you hear about on Mass and Cass in Boston and things like that, but there's still, you know, it still does happen, and we try to provide all the support that we can.
Now, I don't know how to jump from homeless people to people in the middle of the median collecting money. I personally believe a lot of those people are put there by, I don't know what you'd call it, but I think someone schedules them to go there. And there was a man in there was a man a couple of mornings ago on Route 9 in Shrewsbury before the bridge. He was stepping off the median, which I think is against the law, and going up to 2 lanes of cars. He'd go as far over as 2 lanes, hold a sign up, and be right on top of the window staring at the person. And I thought, those people have to be pretty nervous over there with this man standing that close to their car. And that's illegal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of challenges that we could hopefully help those folks with, and yeah, they shouldn't be stepping off the curb into traffic. We definitely don't want that happening, and through public health and the police department, we can hopefully help them find better resources of income and housing and shelter and all those things if we have the opportunity to engage with them.
And I'd like them to find who coordinates for them to be there, because they are scheduled, because they relieve each other. Further over the bridge into Worcester, you see them being relieved by one another. So that means they're working for somebody. So anyways, senior housing, Greenbrier and Cypress. Why would you put senior housing that far away from like bus routes? You know, all the requirements that the town has to meet in order to put senior housing. Private senior housing, they don't have to meet those requirements.
Correct.
But is that a place that's good for seniors to have it?
Well, I mean, I think it, you know, in the lower senior numbers, the 55 plus, which, you know, communities like that are, that, you know, have, you know, aren't assisted living, you know, I think it's just the desirability of those communities not to have kids, you know, is why you see them going into off the beaten path versus, you know, folks needing a bus or wanting a bus. I think those are two different subsets.
Okay, so senior housing before the planning board, and they're using that to break into that area.
That's true.
But then they're going to put houses beyond it. So they're not being upfront by saying, we want to put a development in, but we're going to candy coat it by putting senior housing at the beginning of it, so you all think it's warm and fuzzy. I know I'm cynical, but that's what that's my reaction when I see it. Just my opinion. I don't have any idea who the developer is. I have no idea what they want to do, but to me, flags went up when I saw that. There's a food supply shortage and packaging shortage everywhere. That's all we hear about on the news. But now they're saying it affects the cafeteria, so it affects the menu. So they have to change the menu. So it's gone down as far as affecting federal food programs then, because that's federal funded, right?
Yes.
So interesting. And the Edgemere Diner, is it auctioned off? Did it get sold?
Yeah, it got sold. We had the auction on the 18th, and there were 5 registered bidders, and the highest bid was $45,000.
That's cheap.
Sold to an individual who's going to move it into, I believe, the Catskills region of New York.
Oh, how sad.
Yeah.
We had, I think the White City Diner ended up in Marlboro, but it's not a diner anymore. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Catskills. And only $45,000. That seems like a bargain.
They have to, you know, we did put some clear requirements on it as well. They have to have it off the property by the end of the calendar year.
Right.
So, and there's a lot of other attachments, you know, to the diner car itself, which they're responsible for. The site has to be clean when they leave.
And what's going to happen on that site? Because that's town property.
Yeah, we have no immediate plans, but we've been hearing proposals unsolicited from, you know, people that have reached out to us, and then we've considered a couple internal proposals. It's a very small lot. It's not very deep. We have town interests on the property, and that we have a pump station there and a major water connection within the area. But we thought it was best to get rid of the asset. Now, I know the diner, I've gotten a lot of feedback, as you can imagine. Some folks pretty mad that we sold it. I just like to remind everyone that the diner car wasn't the town's. We did take it through a tax foreclosure process, but I think much to the probably regret of the most recent tenant. The diner car was the tenant's, and it only became the property of the town because they defaulted on their lease. So in theory, they could have sold it before they defaulted, and we'd have never had a say in it. And we, don't want to maintain the asset, so we, put it back into someone's hands who wants to restore it and use it. And in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, it'll be better off.
I hope the town doesn't decide to quickly sell that property for any reason, because just as we put the pump station there, we would have never imagined that we were going to be putting a pump station there,
Right.
30 years ago, and the land became valuable to us. So, and one of Massachusetts' top fire safety educators was Brendan Palumbo, who was runner-up educator of the year. Another case where the fire department, highly motivated firefighters enthusiastically doing work to better the town and keep the town safe.
Absolutely.
So hats off to Brendan. So he was recognized at the Department of Fire Safety Conference. Now we have plans for an electric charging station at Town Hall. Yeah. And I'm saying that sort of in a silly way because in 5 years we'll all be looking for charging stations. I mean, that's how fast that's going to change on us too.
Yeah, it's a major initiative by Selco that they're leveraging state grant funds. Yeah, it's definitely going to be an asset sought after. There'll be 4 charging points there, ports there, and the rates will vary. It'll be rather cheap because we're trying to, again, help with, what folks seem as a perceived risk of buying an electric vehicle is not having a lot of options. So, you won't be able to park overnight. We'll make it unattractive to do that, but it'll be there for folks to utilize in the community.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you talked about Selco, which always makes me think of Michael Hale, who retired and hasn't stopped volunteering since he retired. He's now the community relations officer for the credit union, Shrewsbury Credit Union, who is donating $40,000 to the schools for coordinator of development and volunteer activity position. So it's amazing how different, it's like you can count on certain businesses in town to always support the schools and people in town. And I just wish some of the other businesses would take a lesson because, the credit union has always been there for the town. What I wonder is they're going to donate $40,000. Who pays for it the year after?
Right.
We always have to think of that because it becomes a position with benefits and so forth. So I'm sure they've had those discussions. Now, there's been precinct changes?
Yes. Yeah. Precinct changes that result from the updated 2020 U.S. Census numbers. There's guidelines in the state where you can never have more than 4,000 people in any voting precinct anywhere in the Commonwealth to make sure everyone's vote is as equal as possible. And then we're only allowed to have a minimum deviation between the size of our precincts. So we can't have 4,000 in one and 2,000 in another. So it's really kind of a shell game in some ways to try to right size the precincts to meet the state guidelines, but we also don't want to be super disruptive, or change anyone's voting precinct if we don't have to do it. But we also this year have to keep our eye on what's going to happen over the course of the next 3 to 5 years that we already know. Like we have 250 vacant apartment buildings, and right on Route 20 where Edgemere is, and we know those are going to be filled, and that's going to change the dynamic. So
it'll change again, or is that already taken into consideration?
It's pretty much taken into consideration. We've given ourselves a little bit of buffer in that precinct. We won't redraw the lines again for another 10 years, but we'll look at town meeting representation every 2 years for the next 10 years. But the voting lines will be what they are until 2030.
Speaking of Edgemere and Market Basket, I call it the Market Basket Project. That's what everybody else thinks of it as. We're all like grinding at the bit and anxiously waiting for that to become a reality. And all we see when we drive by is more apartments, and then they put up more apartments. That was all part of the plan.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, come on, put up the businesses. We want to, work on those later. We want to see, we want the business in place. We want, Market Basket to open and whatever else follows in that area.
Believe it or not, 2 separate developers, 2 separate landowners. The commercial is a separate parcel from the residential, although it's, kind of a community looking development. It is 2 separate entities there, but both are on track. We're within a few weeks of the clubhouse opening, so that rentals can begin, and it'd be a time frame of between now and say next fall where buildings will open up and folks will become available. Nothing major at this point, but they are experiencing a little bit in the supply constraint with some materials for the apartments, but they do intend to start leasing within the next few weeks.
So they would move in when?
I'm not sure when folks would move in. I would assume at some point after the first of the year.
So pretty soon.
Yeah.
And when will Market Basket open?
Not for, I believe it's at least another 6 months or so.
I know.
In the spring.
Can't open fast enough.
Yeah.
So then the selectmen met to discuss, they had workshops, and they discussed strategic goals. What are their strategic goals?
Well, so the board set a series of annual goals this summer that they're working through, and one of the major things that they have been working on at those meetings really are 2 things. The overall strategic planning process for the town, and that includes a lot of internal meetings that are going to start the middle of December and run through February, and then the public engagement portion of the strategic plan. We'll have a community survey, and all those things will be coming in early 2022. And then diversity, equity, inclusion task force recommendations, and kind of some preliminary high-level conversations about the board's next steps with regards to taking action on that report is the 2 main strategic points that they've been discussing. We've also discussed finances and things like that. So.
And Gray Star Development on South Street.
Yep.
It's another comprehensive permit for 40B, but it's, what is it? Senior housing, 55 and over. So it must, but it's 196 units.
Yeah, 196 units. They're proposing 25% of them to be affordable. So it's actually within a commercial zoning district, but their approach through the 40B process, they would be allowed to put housing in there.
And it says multi-family development. So does that mean more than seniors going in there, or is it just seniors?
So there's it's primarily seniors. The only deviation from that is in the affordable units. They would be allowed to have children as long as they meet the affordability or the income requirements, and at least one person in the household is 55.
Which brings us to 2 questions. First, with over 55 and over, is there a financial impact on the town when you start putting people 55 and over in clusters in town? Not like assisted living, but I mean, they typically go in fairly healthy in the beginning anyhow. Is there a financial impact to the town?
Not that I'm aware of. It's since it is kind of still very much independent, it's pretty much like any other apartment community. There may be slightly higher than average, medical responses, but it's not extremely disproportionate if you go on a unit by unit basis.
And I saw that Kristen Lass submitted a report about the number of school children in housing developments, in apartment complexes and that. What's the update? What's the latest with that?
Well, we continue to track that because of the obvious pressure on the schools and the continued increase in enrollment. We do still experience very low numbers of students coming in through the apartment communities, especially like Quinn 35, and those apartments are not producing the children even on an average per unit basis, if we kind of make everything equal across the town. So that's good news. Hopefully that would continue, and we wouldn't experience a strong increase in costs related to any of these future developments that are being talked about in the community right now. So not a lot of surprises there, but it's something that's important that we have to monitor for our school enrollment projection purposes with the state, and especially with our new projects in like the Beale Elementary School. But we'll continue to monitor that because it's a great data set that we'll continue to build on.
So I'm running out of time here, but the Civico Greeley group is going to discuss their proposal for the Beale property.
Yes. On December 7th, there's going to be a public hearing with the Board of Selectmen in the Selectmen's room at the Town Hall, and we're trying to get word out as far and wide as we can to receive comments back on that proposal. And there'll be a full presentation by Civico. There's a 3-minute or less video that was put together by Mark Serra at SMC, Bernie Cahill, planning director, and Taylor Galusha, who's in my office, who does community outreach for the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager's office. So it's a well-done video. We're trying to really encourage folks to come out and participate that evening, December 7th.
And Pearl Harbor Day?
Yes.
And the town manager got a salary adjustment. Congratulations.
Thank you
on that. And
Yep.
Now we're out of time, so I can't even talk about it. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.